The Chaser Report is recorded on Gadigal land.
Striving for mediocrity in a world of excellence. This is the Chaser Report.
Hello and welcome to the Chaser Report. Dom here, once again with Chris Taylor. Charles has now announced he's doing a TV show, by the way, called Optics, so that's why he's busy this week. It's filming.
Very excited for Charles. He's doing it with Freudian Nip, Jenna and Vic. Yes, I think it has been officially announced.
It has been announced?
It's a ABC sitcom, I guess you'd call it, a narrative comedy set in the world of PR and spin.
Yes, and I suspect Charles is in the role of hopeless middle-aged white man. I think that's essentially the role. I haven't read the
How
scripts
did he get
yet,
that role?
but I think if you've seen the Contact Tracy sketch that we did on YouTube a few years ago that Charles was part of, it's just that dynamic, essentially.
Yeah, great.
Over
That
and over
was
again.
hugely
That'll be
popular.
good watching.
Yeah. No, we look forward to that and wish them a happy shoot.
Indeed. Now, on today's show, Chris, there's been a lot of discussion of nuclear energy, of course, in Australia. But as part of this, I saw a great article in the Sydney Morning Herald last week. And something I wasn't aware of is the question of what happened. Speaking of small modular reactors, as Peter Dutton has been, the US Navy installed one at the Antarctic base on Ross Island. True or false, the nickname of this machine was Nukey Poo.
Nukey Poo?
Nukey Poo.
How are you spelling poo?
P-O-O. N-U-K-E-Y P-O-O.
Okay, well, this
Do
is
you
my,
believe me?
This is my approach for any true and false question, is if it sounds so preposterous, the person wouldn't have asked it unless it's true. So I'm going to say true, Dom.
Let's have a break until I reveal the answer. Yeah, of course. Who would make up a Nukey Poo? Sounds just ridiculous.
You know, like the way some couples talk to each other in baby language, like, oh,
Yeah.
Nukey Poo, you're so beautiful.
Who's a cute little reactor?
Cute little nuclear reactor. Who's got radiation and uranium? You do. No, you do. Nukey Poo. Well, I guess there's a bit of a history, isn't there, of quite sort of powerful, ugly bits of machinery having cute names.
Yes.
There, the bomb. I don't remember the bomb, or I can't.
Oh, they gave them all cute names,
They
didn't
did.
they? Yeah.
They did. I've done that terrible thing of trying to introduce a fact without backing it up with the actual detail.
I've got it here. It's Little Boy and Fat Man.
Fat Man.
Yeah, Fat Man.
It's also the name, Little Boy and Fat Man, also the name of a Triple M breakfast team.
That's right.
It's Little Boy and the Fat Man.
Tune in until you hear the bomb. Cold hard cash.
Oh, coming up, we're going to be talking to Nukey Poo. So Nukey Poo, no, I didn't. This news bypassed me entirely.
It's an extraordinary story.
A nuclear reactor in possibly the world's most pristine environment. I know that there's science research centres at Ross Island there, but it's not built up. They're little science shacks and sort of almost, when you look at the accommodation, they're almost like shipping containers converted into bedrooms and stuff. It's very rustic and basic. I've never seen pictures of a big nuclear reactor down there.
Well, it's actually quite small. This is the reason why it's interesting. I mean, I don't know that this story particularly paints Peter Dutton's idea in a great degree of. I don't think it's a great story for him, but it's about the size of a shipping container. I'll show you the picture. Here's Nukey Poo. If you go to the Herald website, you can see it's really quite small. So it is about the size of a shipping container, very small. And the reason why they brought it down there was because it was so impossible to get fuel down to Antarctica. So back then, I mean, it was very expensive to get petrol down there. You had to ship everything down there. And so the big idea from the US Atomic Energy Commission was, why don't we just put some nuclear reactors in there? Just small transportable ones.
Do they build them from scratch or build them in America? Yeah, right.
So it was PM3A, it was called, portable medium powered. And
That's
they
not
put
as
it
catchy
at,
as Nukey Poo, is
no,
it?
it's not. Nukey
You
Poo.
can see why they've come up with Nukey Poo.
It's a very good name. And it's actually, they put it in McMurdo Base, which is within the part of Antarctica that New Zealand claims, ironically enough.
Yes.
A bit awkwardly.
Now, lots of questions here, Dom. First of all, so they just thought nuclear was the most efficient way.
Yeah.
I guess solar's not possible because for half the year it's just dark.
Yeah, I don't think they were big on the windmills back
Windmills. What year was it?
1961. So
I'm going back
very
to the
early.
60s, early nuclear. And when would America have started? Well, World War II, they would have started their nuclear program.
Yeah, so
The Manhattan Project.
nuclear power
This
was already
Oppenheimer.
well on the way
Yeah.
by this point. Yeah.
And how did it go? What was the success of Nukey Poo?
Well, legally, they thought it was fine because the Antarctic Treaty said that, look, any nuclear explosions in Antarctica and the disposal of radioactive waste there is prohibited. So they thought, well, not doing that. We've got a little reactor. It's not really exploding. So it's all fine.
The lawyers are happy. The environmentalists
Lawyers are happy. In terms of how it actually went, within the first year, Nukey Poo had caused its first problem, hydrogen fire in a containment tank. There was a shutdown and energy shortages. And very unfortunate. Icebreakers tried to get down there. They had to bring fuel down, and essentially it was so hopeless that they gave up on Nukey Poo. It didn't go very well.
So there's no nuclear reactors in Antarctica
it was
today?
Absolutely hopeless. But what there was contamination. But as is the way with these things, the contamination lasted for quite a long time. So they started trying to decontaminate it in 1972. It was going to take them 3 years, but they discovered
what's become contaminated, like
the site, the fact that they had nuclear stuff.
Just
there.
there's radiation in the area, so it's like post Chernobyl, post Fukushima. That's what's going on in Antarctica. Which thankfully there wouldn't have been many humans around. There's a big penguin population.
A lot of penguins, a lot of glowing penguins.
There are a lot of sort of 5-flippered penguins walking around Antarctica
because of
Nukey Poo.
Nukey Poo, which admittedly barely worked for long at all. Like it was hopeless.
Right.
But during the time that it did work, all this irradiated material apparently leaked. The stuff that was supposed to contain it was corroded, so the stuff seeped out. They didn't embed it in concrete the way you normally do because it was too heavy to transport.
Sounds like
not a great idea. And eventually there were 12,000 tonnes that they had there of irradiated gravel and soil. They had to put it back on ships and get it back to the United States. So can you imagine how much more expensive it was than shipping petrol in?
In the first place.
They had to dig up half the hillside that it was actually installed on and bury it all in concrete-lined pits in the US.
Amazing they were allowed to do this because I've been to Antarctica. It's one of the great experiences of my life, and if anyone ever gets the opportunity, I can't recommend it enough. And the reason it remains, touch wood, remains such an amazing place to visit is it genuinely does feel like the last pristine wilderness on Earth. Now,
it did. Until you learned about Nukey Poo.
Nukey Poo. Come in the 60s. I was going to say, you just couldn't, even though nuclear is regarded as more safe and we know a lot more about it now, I don't reckon you'd get approval to put Nukey Poo in today. I just think...
Well, I'm sure they didn't. I'm sure they just didn't ask.
Oh, you think even back
then?
Think
even within the US, they wouldn't go with it.
Yeah, right.
Because they didn't tell anyone else about it at all.
But the lawyers signed off on it. Or they just...
I think they thought they'd keep it secret.
Keep it secret.
But the story doesn't end there because, unfortunately, Chris, the people who were involved in being on the base... were exposed to long-term radiation.
Oh, the researchers.
And, the researchers who were down there, they had to pay a lot of compensation to the people who were the friends of Nukey Poo who were down there.
Is this all just coming out now? Why is the Herald carrying a story from the 60s?
I think because it's small modular nuclear reactors, to be honest. So this is 2011. It was the case that they realised that they were that the personnel were contaminated. But it went on from there. In recent years, so sort of 2020 on, this is still going in New Zealand. Some of the New Zealanders who are involved as well, who are actually on the ships that ship the irradiated material back to the States.
Bringing it back and forth.
Yeah, they got exposed as well. So they're claiming compensation too.
See, I reckon the whole of New Zealand might have a case because they're all a bit funny. And New Zealand's quite close to Antarctica, isn't it?
Sure.
And I don't know how powerful Nukey Poo was, but I reckon when it really stuffed up, its radiation probably seeped as far as South Island.
I was
certainly
just in the South
Stewart
Island.
Yeah. And I love my Kiwi listeners. I love them. You were just in Christchurch. Did you get you're not quite right vibe?
A little bit. Yeah, no, it's a strange place, but it just goes to show, we can talk about this in a moment, if you do even the smallest little fun-sized nuclear reactor, you never quite know what's going to happen. We'll talk about that in a sec. Because, this is a tiny thing. I mean, the shipping container is not very big.
How big are reactors today? Like what the ones Dutton's proposing or the ones in Japan or America?
Well, those reactors are really quite large. I mean, that's a full industrial power station.
Yeah.
Peter Dutton is proposing that sort of reactor. I don't know exactly how big they are, but I mean, they're major plants, right? They don't fit in a shipping container.
So it wouldn't be a Nukey Poo. It'd be almost a Nukey sewage system. Like it'd be a shitstorm.
So
shitstorm.
That's right. So the Fukushima reactor was much bigger than this.
Yes. So this was tiny. It's as Poos goes, it's sort of on the smaller. The smaller.
It's a little bit of dribble.
Yeah. And yet that's still contaminated. The researchers living there, I presume the wildlife that was in the vicinity at the time.
So I'll show you the Fukushima reactor. So this is, if you look at this it's a major industrial plant, right? I mean, the actual reactor core is quite small within that. A lot of it's all the cooling towers and all that kind of stuff. But it's not a Nukey Poo. That's a much bigger thing.
You'd think, like the Japanese are very good at miniature. You know, like when you go to
Exactly
Tokyo.
right.
And Dom, I know you go to Tokyo a bit.
I love Tokyo.
You know, is it the Golden Guy? That section where the little
Oh,
bars.
the tiny bars.
And
yeah.
they're all like 6-seater bars.
You could fit a lot of those bars inside Nukey Poo,
I
actually.
want to. Where's the sort of miniature nuclear reactor, even smaller than Nukey Poo? Just sort of, a nice little intimate, romantic 4-seater nuclear reactor.
A little sort of fireside one. I want the
Yes.
sort of reactor you can sit around and toast marshmallows.
One you can go to on your honeymoon.
That's right.
A real getaway. Leave the kids at home. Honey, let's go to the reactor for the
That's
weekend.
right.
Just you, me, and a lot of warm radiation.
A nice small unit you could put, I don't know, in the baby's bedroom, keep them warm. Because, use a lot of electricity heating the baby's room. We have the heaters on during the evening for our young children, but we resent it. Yeah. If they were nuclear powered, it'd be fantastic.
Yeah, no, I'd be
Put
I'd
a
be fine
little
with
portable reactor in there.
Yep.
Yeah.
The Chaser Report. News you know you can't trust.
So the point being, just to get serious about Peter Dutton's plan, so he wants some of these full-scale reactors.
The big ones.
The big ones.
Not the intimate
but
Japanese
He
ones.
also wants this new, the small modular nuclear reactor. This is what's being discussed. And this is why Nukey Poo's stories come to the forefront.
I see.
Because
So it was
the whole
so
point
successful, Dutton says, get me some of them.
Get me some more of those. And the problem is that various companies have been trying to design these things. There have been quite a few models that have been experimented with. A lot of countries think this is the way forward. The whole thing is it's smaller. You potentially have less risk, less to go wrong. Some of them would work on alternative fuels from uranium and plutonium, which is less
Put them
polluting.
on the back of your ute or your caravan.
Yeah, that's right. You have one in every Queensland police station to keep the lights on. But the problem is that they don't work. They haven't been able to develop one. So full credit to the US for actually building Nukey Poo at a small scale, because one of the big problems Peter Dutton faces is that this second technology doesn't exist anywhere in the world, and the last company that was actually building it in the States has just given up because it was too expensive and difficult.
This is what I never understand. Like in the last time we got together, Dom, in the previous podcast, we were talking about Elon Musk and his plans to colonize Mars and build cities in Mars. And that, to my head, was just inconceivable. I didn't quite understand it.
Yeah.
If he thinks that's achievable, then that seems much harder than just having a compact nuclear reactor.
Yeah.
Is Musk's plate too full, or does he think he can
develop
fit in
a little fun
Can he
size?
fit in what are they called? Tiny homes? There's a real trend in like Airbnbs for the tiny homes, and people build them in rural areas, and
Very small,
it's just
compact.
a bed and you got to get a ladder up to your bed, and there's one gas hob for your kitchen. I'm kind of picturing them like that. This sort of very eco, if that's the word, eco tiny nuclear reactor.
Well, this is the whole argument Dutton's making, is that he's saying it's green technology.
And
I
it
don't
is
know
in
that
theory.
the people who spent time with Nukey Poo would entirely agree with that perspective. But
if they don't,
zero emissions.
if zero emissions,
Yeah,
and so
or
on
carbon emissions.
zero. So they are very green on the carbon front, and as long as they don't blow their fuse, as it were, incredibly green. The big question I imagine a lot of Australians will have is: do you trust them not to blow their top?
Yeah.
A la Fukushima, a la Chernobyl. Now, there's a lot of people at HBO who saw the hit they had with Chernobyl, and have always said, it's a story with no sequel. Now, if Dutton can give them their sequel, then I reckon he'll get the HBO vote.
Absolutely. I imagine that the story of Nukey Poo is already being developed for
A prequel.
because it's not only is it involves Americans, which is obviously more important than Russians, but the name Nukey Poo, I mean, I can see that on the Netflix.
Where do I invest?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the whole idea. Look, we don't have small modular nuclear reactors yet, but if we can bring back Nukey Poo and perhaps install it, I mean, would Peter Dutton have one in his electorate? Would he have one in his backyard?
Where's the shell of Nukey Poo now? It's completely dismantled.
I think it's just all been buried in a concrete tomb. I mean, you could go and look. You wouldn't survive, but you could go and check it out. This is the problem. When it goes wrong, you've got to bury it in kind of a concrete tomb.
Do you?
Yeah. So whatever's left, I mean, as I said, they had to dig out the whole hillside and all the buildings, ship it back on a series. So the idea that they were going to save money with a little nuclear power plant
Ridiculous.
didn't really come to pass. But that's the policy Peter Dutton's taken to the next election.
And do you understand the politics of it? Because I don't really meet anyone who thinks this is a good idea. And yet someone told me that it actually, was it you? It polls for young men, apparently.
Oh, we were talking about this at our Chaser lunch the other day. Yeah.
5 years ago, I think ScoMo was sort of off the back of AUKUS and stuff, was sort of investigated on the quiet, reintroducing nuclear as a possible policy. And they ran the focus groups on it, and it was just it performed appallingly. There was no interest in nuclear at all. It was a bit of a vote loser.
Yeah.
Something's changed in 5 years where Dutton's obviously decided, oh, no.
Well, there must be some focus group somewhere that are saying,
and someone
or
told
for
me that young men in America are quite pro-nuclear because it's sort of, I think the argument is people begrudgingly sort of agree we need to do something to reduce emissions, but they don't like caving in to the left or the green
to the sort of woke windmill
advocacy.
lobby.
Yeah, we don't want solar, we don't want wind, we don't want high. So they go, okay, we'll be green, but we still have big, ugly machines everywhere. Let's do nuclear.
That's right. It's
so
the
it's
monster
sort of the
truck.
right-wing green thing. Yeah,
it's the monster truck version of like at some point soon someone's going to invent an electric monster truck. And this is the same thing. This is going, well, you still get your zero emissions. Well, that's fine. But we're going to do it with this massively dangerous technology, potentially massively dangerous technology. And so I think that's what this is all about. And I mean, the other theory, of course, is that it will, as we've said on the podcast recently, it'll wreck the renewables industry in the meantime. It
removes confidence in
and
renewables
certainty
investment
in the pipeline.
Because everyone's going, well, if this new guy, Dutton, gets in, then we're not going to invest because the whole policy will be different. So there's obviously a lot of wrecking going on in the policy. So even if it's only semi-seriously stated as policy, its impact on renewables, which Dutton obviously hates because it's seen as a bit nimbin, a bit
nimbin, yeah.
Then sort of mission accomplished because it doesn't really matter if he ever introduces nuclear or not. He just wants to sort of put the brakes on the renewables industry to give comfort and succour to the gas and coal industry.
And of course, in the meantime, that's the implication is it's actually not about nuclear, as we've been saying. It's about coal and gas continuing in the meantime until we get this wonderful fleet of nuclear reactors in 2050. Well, the detail I liked best, I haven't checked if they're still peddling this, and I've said this before, is that David Littleproud, the Nationals leader, said that if they win the election, the plan is to have...
Nationals?
If the coalition wins the election, and I think Dutton backed this up later as well, they will have 2.5 years of consultations of the communities where these things might be built. So they're going to spend all this time asking... You'd think you could basically ask it in one day.
You could dawn up very quickly. You go, do you want
this? Send out a text message, yes or no.
Do you want this huge nuclear reactor next door to you? No. Okay, well, let's think about it for 2.5 years, though. Don't rush into your no.
And the great thing about it is that, I mean, Littleproud then acknowledges that eventually, even with the consultation, it still has to be a yes in the end of the day. I mean, because they've said that they're going to do this.
Can it be like when they do these major roadworks? There was one in New South Wales called West Connects recently where they ask people to leave their houses and they pay them the compensation because they're putting a road through the old street. Is there a price? Would people have a price? They go, oh, I don't like the idea of living next to a nuclear plant. But what if we give you $400,000? Do you reckon, is that the only way they'll get it through? Because no one's going to change their mind on the idea of living next to a nuclear plant.
Either you get the money up front or you get it a little bit later on when, like Nukey Poo, the leaks happen and you've got to get compensated for it. Look, I'm not sure how it's going to work, but I think people will just move away from those. I mean, on the bright side...
But then people will need to move in to work there.
I think we've just found a solution to housing prices in Sydney. I think... And
genius.
The Liberals would go for this. If you build them in inner city, the Latte Belt area,
Surrey Hills,
put them in Surrey Hills,
or put them Brunswick in Melbourne,
or next to Malcolm Turnbull's house, I think would be high on the list as well.
Yep,
they are absolutely, those prices will go right down.
That's really, really good.
Yeah. It's not just an energy solution, it's a housing affordability plan as well. The only thing
I think most people in those suburbs care about more than saving the planet is affordable housing.
That's right.
So if the sacrifice is living next to a nuclear plant, I reckon and that knocks 500,000 off their two-bedroom unit, I reckon they go for that.
Problem solved. Thank you very much, Chris. Our gear is from Road, a part of the Iconoclast Network. Catch you next time.